everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMRE and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, Proptech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. Today's episode will be on the growth of ConTech, and today we are joined by Javed Singer, co-founder and president of Fieldwire, and Vivian Hedge, director of Hilti Tech Office. So welcome to this show.
Thank you, Louisa. Good to be on the Propcast.
Thanks for having us.
Now, let me introduce you to our special guest. So we'll start with Javed, who's joining us from Massachusetts. Javed is an entrepreneur and the co-founder of Fieldwire, a collaboration platform for construction where he leads the go-to-market teams. Now, prior to Fieldwire, Javed worked as a product manager at 2 startups and was a management consultant prior to grad school. Javed received a Master in Engineering from MIT and an MBA from Cornell University. For those who are not familiar yet with Fieldwire, and get familiar, as Fieldwire is the simplest way for construction companies to keep everyone organized on the job site. With its easy-to-use mobile applications, Fieldwire saves each user up to 1 hour per day by enabling more efficient information sharing. Now, 1 hour a day is a huge amount of time. So, Javed, I'm eager to hear a little bit more later on the show how you do this. Fieldwire is used on over, how many projects worldwide, Javed? It's something
we just broke 1 million projects.
Wow. Okay. So I can't wait to hear more how you've done that since you started. So welcome. Now for Vivian's introduction. Vivian, who's also joining us today from San Francisco. I met a few months ago at one of Michael Beckerman's CreTech Digital Brella events, and we just sort of chatted about the market, and he kindly introduced me to the Fieldwire team a few months ago, and we've just been touching base ever since and talking about the growth of ConTech. Now, Vivian's role is slightly unusual. And we'll hear a bit more about it later, but he fundamentally leads Hilti's scouting and corporate venturing arm across North America and has a huge focus on new age technologies. Now, these technologies could be robotics, IoT, AI, VR, it completely varies, but it's all within the construction space. And those who don't know who Hilti are, there's something like 30,000 staff worldwide, and they are the world leader providing high quality, innovative and specialized tools, fastening systems and software-based solutions for the professional user. But yeah, they're massive. So if you don't know about them, definitely look them up. Vivian is deeply immersed in the construction tech ecosystem and helps multiple startups, firms, accelerators as an investor, board member, advisor, and mentor. And previously, he led sales and strategy teams at both Hilti and McKinsey across multiple geographies worldwide. And impressively, Vivian is a trained mechanical engineer and a finance MBA by education, and has briefly dabbled in investment banking at Deutsche Bank before joining McKinsey. I love how you can dabble in something like that. Most people would dream to get there, but very impressive nonetheless. But let's get started with the questions. Thank you both for joining. Why don't we start with, and Javed, you can go first. How did you get into construction tech? I know we briefly mentioned that you were previously at a couple of startups before. Talk me through it.
Yeah, so in my case, it was pretty lucky, to be honest. All credit goes to my co-founder for getting me into the construction software arena. He was a civil engineer by trade and had approached me about founding Fieldwire. We had worked together at a previous company, Ubisoft, and he kind of presented me the idea. And it made a ton of sense for me. I hadn't come from the industry, but having some kind of knowledge of supply chain engineering at a high level, it made sense. But probably more importantly, when I was a product manager at a couple of startups, I had been really dependent on software like Jira to run our product and engineering teams. And essentially, as my co-founder was explaining it, we were basically just going to be a physical version of Jira. So helping people, instead of just build in software, we can actually help build whole buildings. And so to me, it made a ton of sense. Did some research to see that it really was a lacking, there's a lack of solution in the market for it. And we just kind of burnt the ships and went for it.
Nice. Well, it seems to have gone pretty well so far. Now, Vivian, what about you? Obviously, background, finance, engineering, now corporate venture? How do you get into this space?
Just like Javed, happenstance, right? So it wasn't planned to be this way. So back in early 2010s, I joined Hilti, and that was mostly because it was an industrials company. It was in construction, but it was an industrials company. And I have a background in industrials. I'm a mechanical engineer. Even in McKinsey, I spent all my 7 years working on industrial projects, whether it's construction, manufacturing, and so on. And Hilti gave me the exposure to construction quite considerably, being part of the strategy team, being part of the sales teams, visiting 10 job sites every single day, selling some of those tools as well. So it was a very exciting opportunity when I joined Hilti. And 3-4 years back, our CFO actually approached me and he said, "Hey, Vivin, this is super interesting. There's so many changes that are happening in this space, and we don't think we have enough visibility into this space. And we want to set up an arm where we look at emerging tech. We partner with the ecosystem, help them grow, but also make sure the Hilti's vision is very much in line with what's happening on the job site and with what customers want." And that's how I set up this office in North America along with my colleague. And it's been an amazing experience. So I wouldn't say I'm one of the experts in the space, but I'm still learning. So there's a ton of learning that's happening, and this is a fantastic time to be part of this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's I think for Hilti to make a move and invest in a space of a business that's sort of large, it's pretty impressive. There's so many other big businesses who are almost nervous to make that investment or don't know where to start. Now, talk to me a bit. How did you first cross paths? Maybe Vivin, this is a question for you as you introduced Javed and I.
Yes. So Hilti was dabbling in the space, right? So when we are looking at entering the ConTech space and staying close to the ecosystem, Fieldpower is actually a first investment in the space. So you could even say they're kind of our gateway in terms of entering the space from a learning perspective, from a startup collaboration perspective. And that's how I met Javed, right? Javed and Eve are two wonderful people. And this is how we also started our interactions. And ever since, we've been working together.
Now, Javed, this is the perfect time to talk us through your product. You know, how do you work with Hilti? How do you, I guess, make the whole process a lot smoother?
Yeah, so there's a couple aspects there. So in terms of FieldWire, we're basically a field management solution, allowing people to kind of record, track, and share information more efficiently on site. And so that's everything around scheduling tasks, being able to access all your drawings, BIM viewer. You can record any sort of information that's occurring on site, being able to have real-time communication around it, and then generate any sort of forms and reports to make sure it's well documented. And so we kind of luckily had met up with the Hilti team on one of their trips to San Francisco, and we happened to be working with them actually before that, where we were working with the PDCS laser scanning solution to get pre-installed actually on some of their hardware. And it was a really cool opportunity to get to work closely with them, as we always kind of had looked up to Hilti. I mean, they're a 75-year-old plus company, still family kind of owned. And when you kind of look at the scale that they operate at, when we were trying to get our fifth salesperson up and running, they have a team of 30,000, right? So it's hard to not look up and say, oh, wow, they've obviously figured out a thing or two. And so we kind of looked at the world of where could we end up one day, and one kind of theme that still plays in is I think there'll be a collision between hardware and software down the line. And looking at some of the software solutions that Hilti had been working on, it seemed like an interesting opportunity to partner up and just share learnings. There's not a ton of deep integration between the products, but there's a lot of interest in trying to help basically the industry be more efficient on site. And so where we get to kind of trade some notes occasionally on how we look to do distribution, and then where we like to learn from Hilti on how they do distribution. And so it's been great to have Vivin and the entire Hilti team as supporters for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite the client to have. I can't, taking on Hilti as, one of your sort of first clients, it's quite the beast, isn't it? Vivin, from your experience, how has it helped the Hilti construction process, and I guess some of your teams, and does FieldWire work across your teams globally as well?
Yeah, so Fieldwire is more a software that our customers use than what Hilti uses directly. For us, Hilti has traditionally been a hardware player. So our products have mostly been focusing on hardware. But as construction is digitizing, more and more of the mind share from the customers is moving towards software. And that's where Fieldwires comes in, right? So it's basically enabling our customers to be more productive in some of the most important topics. And also, when it comes to the workforce, typically this has all been done through pen and paper. And now we're able to do this digitally, which is bringing huge efficiency gains to the market. So for us, it's a learning experience because this is not something that we've done in the past. It also helps strengthen our relationships with the customers when we're talking about things that are most important to them, and rather than just talking about the hardware legacy that we have. And this also fits in with a few other topics that we're working on when we talk about our robotics that we're bringing to market or exoskeletons. So bringing new solutions and software helps us be looked at as a new innovative player, right? And that's where Fieldwire partnership has been so helpful.
Yeah, and Javed, I'd love you to elaborate on your sort of experience of implementing this your product. It's obviously construction, just obviously general, the real estate industry is fairly not archaic. I think huge moves are being made, but it can't be a smooth, easy process, especially in the earlier days of Fieldwire. What challenges have you come up against and sort of overcome?
Yeah, I think you touched on an important point, which is getting software to be adopted on site is kind of the core goal. And we generally have a simplistic framework we discuss when we talk to customers around, does it get adopted, does it work at scale, and does it generate a positive ROI? And in the early days, when we founded Fieldwire, people weren't even using the cloud necessarily. And we talked to a ton of people that were like, oh, our team will never use mobile devices on site. I'm very happy to see that trend changed very quickly in our founding year or two. But essentially what we tried to do is build a product that could get up and running in a couple of minutes. And I think building something that was easy to use, and I think even I tried to apply a lot of our consumer product development knowledge from gaming, for instance, into building the onboarding flow to Fieldwire. And if you come from gaming, you realize no one has a ton of patience to read a manual before you do anything. And you try to have, concept of like progressive disclosure in your product where you can see there's more and more power as you dive into it, but you don't overwhelm someone with hundreds of buttons when they log in. And so we try to put these things together to just allow us to gain field level adoption and to actually try to get on site without having to go top down through CIOs and IT teams. And that worked exceedingly well in the early days. And I think the majority of our largest customers, from Clark Construction to Ellis Dawn to Built, to Graham's and others, they actually all got adopted bottom up. We've changed and now been able to sell more top down, like with companies like Power Design. But we have distributed our product to literally thousands of customers, and we've probably met less than 1% of them. And that's just kind of through the power of digital distribution and building a seamless onboarding program. With that said, we still make sure we have an entire team of construction professionals on staff that work with people to make sure that we incorporate their workflows effectively and we can deploy things easily. But I can table that and talk about it if interested later.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to go into that a bit more. You mentioned about going in at sort of bottom up. So and obviously it changes from business to business, product to product, country to country. A lot of feedback that I've had, it's all about top down selling, because you've got to get the senior management, whoever's the boss man or women, on board with it, that they want to invest in this product, which obviously, Vivian, you obviously must work with these senior stakeholders. Vivian, what's your experience of getting the business to trial new technologies and I guess educate them and push them forward into any sort of form of digitalization?
It's a process, and I can talk about this from a Hilti perspective and also from a customer perspective. So we are a European conservative manufacturer, right? So in terms of brand image being important, we have to be very mindful of what do we bring to our customers. So, and being of a hardware legacy, getting it right the first time has always been part of the philosophy in the past, right? That means you don't want to make any mistakes when you're doing deployments. but it's completely a different approach to what you use with software, where you want to be agile, you want to get customer input, and you want to fail fast. So it's a little bit of a cultural change when you're trialing new technology and bringing that into the organization. Also because it distracts from your other shorter term priorities, because innovation by definition is something that you're looking out for the longer term. So what you have to do is you have to make sure you're aligned on the topics that are most critical. So as long as the incentives are aligned, you get some traction. As long as you don't bring too much change at the same time, it's helpful for large organizations because it's digestible, right? If you want to bring change, but if you try to completely break the system, then you'll find much more resistance, right? The immune response is very strong in large corporates. So you have to manage that as you ramp up. That's also true for our industry in general, right? Construction, real estate in general has been slow moving. So it's helpful to have solutions like feedback, for example, where you're not breaking the system. You're actually using a current analog system or paper-based system and converting into digital. So from a process perspective, they're still doing what they're doing. They're just doing it more efficiently. So you have to pick the right battles, at least initially. And once you reach a certain scale, then automatically you can move to the next phase and be much more disruptive.
And I guess to get people on board, it's also helpful, like Javed mentioned earlier, he's got actual construction people working within his business. Javed, your tagline is the job site management solution built by craftspeople for craftspeople. So I presume this is about whether you have a mixture of technologists, construction people, and probably various other people with different experiences and backgrounds within your business. How do you hire for your team? Because construction tech is something quite alien to a lot of our listeners. Lots of them might be founders as well, or even real estate people. How do you strike the balance?
Yeah, I think it's an important one. And we really strive to find people that are builders in whatever capacity that is. It can be, with a hammer or a keyboard. And so a good portion of our company, probably almost like 50%, are probably engineers by trade. Our entire, what we call customer success or client services team are from the construction industry. So it's people that have, worn boots on sites before and have kind of experienced these pains firsthand, as well as I think the majority of our product team also has been either come from industry or has come from a construction tech background as well. And so we just find it really important to be able to build and service customers to actually have people that fundamentally know the industry inside and out. And so, I think you can go in and have empathy and learn from your customers. And I think it's a great industry where people have literally sent me 20-page wireframe product suggestions. But I think if you can short circuit some of those learnings and bring on folks that have come from the industry, you just are able to kind of communicate and work with them in a much, much more effective manner. And that's been kind of core to our company.
Yeah, I think we're hiring for some other construction tech companies, and where there's a massive skill shortage in the market, it's people who have the construction experience, but also say the SaaS sales experience. I think they're in sort of high demand. So it's as this industry grows, so hopefully there'll be more of a surplus of them. And Javed, I'm sure you feel the same way.
It's a small Venn diagram, I would say, the overlap there of people with those two backgrounds. But I think what we found is we can bring on project engineers, field engineers, and integrate them exceedingly well and turn it actually into kind of our bench, where people come in and join Mariel's construction team. She's our VP of the construction team, and then have kind of moved on into operations, into product, into marketing, and different roles. And again, it's just a great entry point to allow folks that may not have a SaaS background basically make that jump into an organization like ours, get a broad swath of experience, and then decide do they want to stay kind of in that type of role or branch out. And it's been a phenomenal feeder pool for us.
Yeah, that's so refreshing to hear. I did a webinar the other day, and it was called Proptech Career Option View, and I had people from BC, I had them from the consultancies, I had someone from a startup, and we were basically talking to the traditional real estate world, people also from marketing, hospitality, all sorts, finance, and just saying you might not know what options are within the built environment innovation or what ones are coming up, but there are so many. So whether you're a project manager by background or say someone who's come no real estate experience and say just straight SaaS, there's so many different roles coming up. And like if a business is, say at the stage yours are, there's often a lot of sort of, well, I guess, learning and training that startups can sort of do. So it's really refreshing to hear you say that.
Position yourself to thrive with a 5-week course that covers the essentials of designing, developing, marketing and operating offices in 2021 and beyond. Check out the Future-Proof Office course at realinnovationacademy.com. Quote LMRE for a 10% discount.
Now, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, from both of you, and Vivian, maybe you can go first. What changes have you seen in the adoption of ConTech across countries? And feel free to elaborate on it and maybe give some examples.
So I think the adoption is actually quite different across geographies. And this is for a few reasons. So one is the labor cost itself. So in areas where the labor cost is high, you'll see higher adoption of construction tech startups. For example, US, Canada, Australia, Japan. You'll see the adoption is higher because the labor rate cost is higher, right? The second is the labor shortages which are happening. Japan, for example, has one of the highest adoption of robotics in the world because of the labor shortage issues that they're facing. And then there are cultural and regulatory issues which come into play here. For example, Europe has traditionally been focused on environment and safety and so on and so forth. And modular construction as a trend has been there for the last 30, 40 years. So there are geographic elements which come into this. Asia today is actually very diverse in the sense that Asia, if you look at China and India, the big cities, they adopt the same technologies that are adopted across the world. But if you go to the smaller cities and smaller construction projects, the adoption of technology is very, very low. So the various factors which fall into this. If I were to bucket where the adoption is highest, I would say North America is probably where it's the highest. And then you have Europe, and then you have the rest of the world. That's driven by all of these different traits. But one thing we've seen across the globe is the increase in adoption, and that's happening rapidly. And we expect this to look very different 5 years from now, because even now, compared to how it looked like in 2015, 2016, I think there's a dramatic difference on the level of adoption of technology.
And Javed, from a founder's perspective, what have you seen?
I'd say everything Vivian said is absolutely spot on. I think the only additional thing that we've noticed is also somewhat the way that software gets adopted on site changes by geography. And so I think when you look at North America, things get adopted a lot more bottom up. I think it's just kind of the cultural mentality of more the cowboy style of I'm going to try something out. I think when you look at Europe, it's a little bit kind of more in between. And then when you go to places like Asia and the Middle East, software is usually selected much more top down still. And so I think we're starting to see that change. But that's still, I think, an aspect of how the decisions are being made. But also, as Vivian talked about, it's somewhat an aspect of cost. And so, the field isn't going to select a solution that costs almost the same as salaries in certain geographies. That would have to come top down. And so I think these are some of the different, I guess, trends we've seen when we try to look at implementing and getting the software adopted globally. But I'd say it's been easier than we would have guessed early on. And I think that the thing that we're trying to do now is, while supporting kind of a global customer base in over 100 countries, is making sure that we have more offices so that we can do more 24-hour support. So it was really important for us to open up a Paris office not too long ago, just because we have so many folks over there that are very difficult to communicate with from an SF time frame.
Yeah.
So we don't have a ton of overlap. So that gave us a little bit more ability to have kind of 24-hour kind of coverage.
That's interesting. The French market is a tough one to get into, but also just I know that from this various legislation. We were in another podcast, I was talking about what countries, and it's so impressive, 100 countries, Trevor, like, congratulations that, by the way, but there's certain countries where it's a lot easier to launch, like Canada, there's certain things the government's put in place, so it's easier to launch. the Middle East, in Dubai, the local government there is now making it super easy for startups to launch, as they really want to attract. They're calling it like the new middle class. So it's not just finance people that go there, and it just makes it, I guess they've already lost since COVID. Saw obviously retail, which was one of their biggest incomes, and tourism's basically gone. So they're now looking at different ways of making it more attractive and easier for tech startups to launch there. So, but congrats on your growth. Now, we've spoken about trends and changes. What about, and this is, don't worry, I'm not asking you both to look into a crystal ball or say anything, say it's factual. What about future predictions for this space? We spoke about sort of growth, which is no doubt hopefully going to continue to happen. Any other areas or changes we think we're going to see, Vivian?
I think we'll see plenty of changes. I would say we are very early in the tech adoption scene and construction, right? So we are starting to put some of the foundational blocks. So as I said earlier, what we're right now doing is changing some of the analog processes to digital processes. So once that is done, that actually helps us get to the next step of applying AI to some of these processes, of breaking down the data silos between the different stakeholders today that exist. And once you break down that, you can actually look at optimizing schedule, optimizing job site practices. You can talk about deployments of robots. You can talk about having actual living digital twins in the job site. So I think the next 5-10 years will be super exciting in this space. And if I use a baseball analogy, I would say we are probably in the first or second innings. We are very early in the process. So there are multiple changes coming in the future.
That's exciting, isn't it? Jared, what about you? Any predictions? It could be also, what are the sort of the further growth plans for your company as well? I mean, you're already in 100 countries.
Well, we're still not quite Hilti's size, so we have a long ways to go there before we can truly kind of map the globe. But I would say, I think what Vivian talked about from a trend standpoint is spot on. My guess is we'll see some additional consolidation of some of the smaller players and a move away from point solutions to platforms. I think when I look back just 5 years ago, there was a real push for, hey, I need a product to do X. And I think Vivian kind of touched on it, it's great to now capture that data, but having it all in one place that you can start making better recommendations and learnings from is where we're going to see kind of the market pushing. And so I think that's an area we're trying to get out in front of as well, which is trying to have a broader platform-based offering. And so there's a lot more to come from our side.
I'm looking forward to it, Jared. Now, guys, the final part of the Propcast, this is new to season 5, so I'm trying to make it slightly more structured and on brand. It's called the LMRE side. So L, lessons learned. M, mention anyone, a product, service, shout out. R, any regrets, but hopefully a positive spin on it. And E, what are you most excited about in the future of Proptech? So, Javed, do you want to go for the first one? So L, lessons learned.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson I learned was almost, especially when coming out to Silicon Valley, was to unlearn most of the things I did in my MBA program, to be honest. I think an MBA is great. It teaches you how to think about things strategically. I think startups are about 95% execution and 5% strategy sometimes. And I think I had spent a lot of time building presentations. And I remember one of my president of Ubisoft telling me, I think in my 4th week, okay, let's both agree, you know how to make nice presentations. In the future, just come with some bullet points and you'll save yourself a lot of time. And so I think there was a lot of things that I had to kind of relearn. And I think one suggestion I would have for anybody is really taking ownership of your career and taking kind of the path least or less traveled, let's say. And so I know I made some decisions to take kind of less pay or less titles sometimes to make sure I got to learn a lot more and to take on far more responsibilities I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And I think that really was helpful. I think, for instance, going and trying to do product management in the gaming space is not an area the typical MBA thinks about going. But you get to run, $100 million product, fresh out of school, which you probably wouldn't get anywhere else. And so I think sometimes looking for opportunities that are less normal, even though they came with less pay out of the gate, definitely paid off in terms of being able to learn a lot more and get to kind of where I am in my career.
Oh, I'm sure. And you have had quite the career, and looking forward to what comes over the next few years, well, and more. Vivian, what about you? Talk us through what's the biggest lesson you've learned so far to date?
So the one thing I've learned is there's no cookie cutter recipe for innovation. And the reason I say that is when we think about innovation, we talk about disruption. We talk about breaking down everything that exists and trying to come up with something new. As we've spent time in construction and we've actually looked at the stakeholders and looked at what works, what doesn't, we've actually learned innovation doesn't have to break down everything, at least initially. You have to deploy innovation in a way that it is also implemented well. So in this case, innovation is just building the foundation and bringing efficiency gains before you think about applying AI to a job site, which optimizes everything, right? So it's about being flexible, and it's about deploying the right solution at the right time for the right kind of stakeholders. And that is not how everybody thinks sometimes. So it's also a learning experience for us when we've looked at this.
Thank you for that. And okay, so now both your chances, and Java, go first. Anyone you want to mention, or maybe a product, you can't say your own product, or someone you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I'd probably give a shout out at this moment to my VP of Operations, B. He's been super critical to the company, taking on a ton of additional responsibilities over the last couple of weeks. And so just would say thank you to him for doing that.
If you're listening, hopefully you're listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And Vivian, what about you?
So I would like to give a shout out to two of my mentors. One of them was with Hilti. He was the CFO who actually tapped me for this role. He is now the CEO of Knopf, Jörg Kampmeier. So thanking him for the trust that he imposed, and also the vision he had in terms of helping us set this up. And the second shout out I would like to give is to John Dugaji, one of my other mentors, who's just taking over as the CEO of Hilti starting next year. And it was the two of them who actually saw the vision for this office, the fact that we need to move in this direction, and pushing the company in a different direction from where we are going earlier, right? So huge kudos for them for the foresight and also the backing that we've received over the last few years.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, now the big old R. Any regrets in your career? Now, Jared, hopefully it's not doing your MBA.
No. I still, everything is built to a good spot. And so, to be honest, I don't know if I have a ton of regrets, given I'm pretty happy where things have turned out. From a kind of personal standpoint, I think, professionally, if there's anything, it's probably should have done a better job of hiring at different stages in the company, to be honest, for people that were the right fit. I think that would be kind of a professional one that if I could get a do-over on a couple of those, where we just would look to bring in people that would be, that they were always great people, but making sure that we're bringing in people that fit for the exact moment for where we were in the company. And so that would be the only one I could think of that sometimes I feel kind of bad for with sometimes the turnover in the company. But otherwise, generally pretty happy with my personal career. But that would be my major area of what I would do differently. And we've learned a lot from hiring in the past that we try to apply now. But that would probably be the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, and I can echo that. And I'm going through the same thing. Obviously, recruitment's always naturally high turnover, but also from seeing from our clients, every startup experiences, it's like teething problems, and a huge thing which we're trying to implement. And loads of, I think startups are so good at doing, they're way better at doing it than big consultancies and agencies, and maybe because they're so big and it's too late to implement. But it's so difficult creating the right culture, growing globally, and keeping everyone happy. So teething pains, but from what I've heard, it's all good things. Vivian, what about you? Any regrets?
So I would say regrets in the sense that I'm happy with where I am, like Javed said, right? But there are a few things I could probably do a little bit differently. I could have entered this space earlier. This is so exciting. I would have loved to spend more time in ConTech, but it's still early, so I'm happy about that. The second thing that I would think of is take more risks. So it's always easy to be safe. and comfortable. I would like to be more uncomfortable more of the time. And that's something I'm still working on, but I think that would be a good thing for me to have done even in the past. So take more risks is what I would say.
No, I should have put you on the spot with a weird old question with okay, this is the last question. And what are you most excited about the future of Proptech? We asked a similar question, but something maybe not relevant to it could not even be relevant to construction tech. Javid, if you want to go first.
I mean, I think kind of what Vivin talked about earlier in terms of the trends is really what's the most exciting is I haven't seen this much innovation in the construction space since we founded the company. I know even as an organization, we're starting to get to innovate again and hit our own inflection point. But I think when you look at the market, it's just really impressive. A lot of the companies that are spinning up right now, how interested the industry is in adopting tech is just super exciting. And I think it's great that it's getting the attention that it deserves.
Awesome. And Vivin, the closing question, what are you most excited about?
Robotics and AI. So both of these trends are going to be mega trends for construction and Proptech in general. And we are at a tipping point. So right now there is interest. All of the startups in the space are still super early, but in the next few years, now that the foundation is being laid, these could bring dramatic efficiency gains in construction. So I'm really excited to see how this shapes up in the next few years.
I sort of feel like robotics and AI terrifies a lot of people. So yeah, it'll be interesting to learn more about this space. So maybe that's a good idea for my next podcast. Look, thank you both for joining me from across the Atlantic. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show, but please let our audience know the best way to connect with each of you. Vivin, why don't you go first?
So best way to reach me is either on LinkedIn, Vivin Hegde, or on email, vivin.hegde, vivin.hegde@hilti.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And Javid.
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably one of the best as well. Just Javid saying on LinkedIn, and then or just email me, javid@fieldwire.com.
Awesome. Look, thank you both for joining me on the Propcast. I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Louisa.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. And I'll catch you later.
Hi, this is Nelson from Property Quants. I'd like to invite you to join our Introduction to Data Science and Machine Learning for Real Estate seminar. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/seminar and use special code LMRE20 on Eventbrite for a discount.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.